Welcome to Afrika Design. I'm Adrian.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Naitiemu.
And we have with us Nyambura Waruingi. Thank you for joining us, Nyambura.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for including me in the work that you do.
Always a pleasure.
So we said we'd work backwards because there's so many things we'd love to talk about. First, I'd want to ask you actually, how did you discover your ability to connect artists and technology?
Wow, the heavy hitters, right? I should have had wine, not coffee. I really should have. I think it's because of the time that I was working in film and television. So I cut my teeth in film production in Canada, in Montreal, Canada. That's where I went to study. Actually, I want everybody, all the young ones, to know that I didn't get in the first time I applied. And so I had to apply a second time. So I really do believe in, if you want something, you really go after it, even if somebody has closed the door for whatever reason. You know, you might not be ready according to them or however life pans out. But the most important thing is for you to keep on trying. So I applied. I went to Canada in winter semester, not like everybody who goes in like the autumn, which is September. So I went in December, like in January, ahead of everybody. And then I applied to the School of Communication Studies, which is really one of the most phenomenal schools in communications, cultural studies, and film studies in Canada and North America, and at Concordia University. And I didn't get in. The first year I didn't get in. And I was like, okay, I've schlepped all the way from the Africa, from Kenya, from Nairobi, Kenya. What do we do next? And also, you know, for us who have grown up with African parents, you have to explain why you didn't get in. I mean, your grades were there. What did you do? You know? So I tried again and I got in the second time. And about that time, what was happening in the world was around early 2000, 2005, 2006, people are looking at how do we work with the internet as not just as a marketing strategy for films, which if you remember a film called Gangs of New York by the great Scorsese, Gangs of New York had internet, like a web page that was really an attempt of interaction. So they had like a map and all of that type of stuff. And those are the things we're learning in like digital media communication, which was basically Photoshop at that point in time, not the Unity and everything else everybody's learning right now. So during that time, it was how do you link the internet to the films that you're making? And I was fortunate enough to work hard and really knock at the door of the National Film Board of Canada. It was an organization that is revered in terms of documentary, and I just wanted to get in. And at a point, I got the chance to apply for a position, and I got in. And it's one of those positions where you believe they've already been taken. It was a coordinator position in the Director General's office of the English program. And I got in. I couldn't believe it. And when I did, it was also an important time for them because the animation studio that has so many Oscar nominations, so many Oscar wins, and also because they are at the vanguard of all this type of innovation in media and animation. They're the ones who started stereoscopic work and all of that, and trying to understand how we're looking at transmedia and creating documentary for transmedia. So during that time, I just recognized that there's a place. There's a place for that. And that was mid-2000s. And so coming back to Kenya, when I decided I wanted to set up my own creative enterprise that became Akoia Company, it just seemed so obvious that technology would be a part of it. And not just, technology is everywhere, like a new media approach to the work that that you're doing, collaboration across artistic disciplines, whether you're working with literature, moving images, you're working with the web as also a portal for people to access work and all of that. So that just came from the work that I was doing prior to moving back here and the organizations I was working with. And during this time prior to moving to Kenya, which was 2012, a lot of work was being done online, because the notion of accessibility, how we're getting different audiences, and then what are we creating for them? And also understanding that you're also dealing with niche audiences. So how are you creating different niches as you're going along, and not necessarily thinking you're taking away from your moving image, which would be the film that would be in theater or in different, cultural organizations, because that was something that I learned out of working with two organizations, one of them being Iglulik Isuma, that produced the first Inuit language film in Canada called Atanajuat, and Zacharias Kunuk won the Camera d'Or during that time, and as a director, and it really opened up filmmaking in the North. And that's basically how we're told. We're told we work in the South and they worked in the North. And we even had to adjust to the time. So there were times like it's hunting season. So hunting season is coming up. So you need to get all the information you need, because nobody's going to be in the office because it's hunting season. So you also learn different timelines and working with literally different types of communities. So that was, I think, the trajectory to when I decided to have my own creative enterprise was, you know what, everybody's welcome. And how do we work across? And that really came into play with the No Direct Flight film season, where right now Downriver Road has published Asphyxia, that has the cinema collaboration, which is writers reflecting on different films that were part of the film season. So really just making ways that different artistic disciplines can participate in a moving image project.
Oh, thank you for that intro into how you got here. And just let me ask you a question about your mic. Like, where is it placed? Is it?
It's on the computer. You're not hearing me? Is that it?
We're hearing you, but at the end of your S's and your T's, it's like.
Oh no! This is a mic. It's on my computer.
I wonder if you can control your input.
Where would I go to do that?
I think it might be. Try now.
Hello. S
Okay.
and T.
Yeah, it's like hissing.
Some crackling.
Yeah, it might be just
I'll get rid of all the S's and T's in my
Actually,
speech.
just try to avoid them.
I will avoid M.
Let's see how it goes. I mean, we can hear you.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes it goes at the top end. Yeah. Maybe it's just sensitivity.
All right.
So, having started Akoia and company, and you've gone into a lot of immersive technology and involving a lot of creatives, what are some of the projects you worked on, like NOMA exhibition? How was it?
That was, it was a culmination of a lot of what I had been working on. I was really lucky to have to work with the artists that we did. What was really exciting about NOMA was it hadn't been done before. And so how do we bring the different programming around it, which was about really getting different people, like different communities, constituency groups to participate. So that would mean, how do we get artists to come and talk to other artists about the work that they're doing? And how does the amplification of working in using VR and AR tools, how does that shift some of the work and how you think about producing the work, which is for me very exciting because, you make a film, there's, it's, development, production, post-production, it comes out, it goes out either in cinema, and now because you have digital cinema, you're no longer thinking about like the film stock or any of that. So you have D-Cinema, you kind of just drop it down and it's screened wherever in the world. But with this, it became a discussion around, okay, what are we, this is a story, but it's functioning in another world. So how is it that this story can be told through Google Blocks? Or how is this story going to be told using Tilt Brush? And it kind of becomes a sense of genre. So you know the way you have fantasy film. There's a certain way fantasy films look. If they don't look a certain way, you're like, they lied to us. There's no way this is a fantasy film. So I find for me was just learning how to now look into how you create a genre around your work using the different tools that you do have, and thinking about really not just telling a story in a linear way, in a narrative way that is one leads to the another outside of experimental film, but really getting people to get into the world of what you're doing. And that was a change in the flip. It's a way that artists can take something that is that's usually placed on a wall that we interact in a very 2D kind of perspective, but we get to take a walk in the work that they do. And that was what was exciting, and figuring out, how do you get people to move around? How do you get people to turn around? How do you get people, if you're watching on the Rift, how does this work? If you're watching on a Quest, how does this work? If you're watching off the phone, how would it work? So you're also adapting to the platforms that you're using. And also looking, one of my favorite things was watching other people, because you also learned what made them tick and what they responded to. And this was pre-COVID, so everybody was, packed in a room, and at any point in time, people were sharing devices, people were watching other people, participate and interact with the work. And then that got them also courage, at times, donning on that headset, getting, into all of that, it can be daunting. And at times you're like, I'm not messing with my hair for that. But in terms of, watching the excitement and the investigation and the world that they go through, because we had screens to have people watch what other people were doing in the world, they're like, oh, I want to go there, or I want to see where else I can go. So it really became a participatory, immersive experience that was not only for those who were using the headsets or on their phones, but for those who are just watching. And that was what was also exciting. And then creating a program for the kids, the middle schoolers, and they were schooling us on what to do better. And that's always fun. Also then bringing the artists, as I said, artist to artist talks, and also having public programming where you have, just people come in and interact with the work. And that for me was a success of Norma, it wasn't just for the silo, for the in crowd, it was for everyone. And I'd have parents ask me, could you take this to Village Market? Could you take this to Galleria? Because I'd like for my children to interact with this. I want them to see what is possible. So that was really great about it. And in terms of working, I think for the artists, because I come from film, so you have about 10 departments at any time having to collaborate with each other. But for visual artists who tend to work by themselves most of the time, because we're working mostly with people who painted, was that they learned that there was a team around recognizing and bringing your vision to life. There were coders, there were UX designers, there are UI designers. There's everybody who participates in how you make your work. So also kind of looking at the collaborative approach to working and making art that's also yours, that you have different people that are part of it. So I think that was something that was really great, was a shift in how artists looked at their work, how it could come to life, a shift in terms of the different people who get involved in making your work come to life, and then the interaction and the audience feedback in ways that doesn't necessarily happen with the visual arts, particularly because at this point we're working specifically with visual artists.
How do you make sure then, as you're designing, a lot of your work is designing immersive experiences, right? So an exhibit. how do you ensure, first of all, that those are inclusive, like you said? Let's go for that one first.
By trial and error. There's nothing eloquent about that. It's literally trial and error. And inclusion even includes the thought of, is there a ramp that leads people to that space? Is where do you position the work so that differently able people can experience it too? By having people on site to ensure that people can get to the work that they want. And then from the creative perspective, like making the work, I think a big part is crit sessions. Crit sessions are a part of the art world, which is basically you sit down and critique work, but also really focusing on what the creative development is before the work actually comes out. Sorry, there's an airplane somewhere. I'm in a flight path. So what happens is spending a lot of time in creative development in order to have work that has really taken its time to cook. Imagine a slow cooker, like really thinking through and consistently refining the idea. Your first idea is great, it leads you down a great path, but how are you consistently refining the idea so that your output, I know that's not a sexy word, but your output becomes something that's evocative. And that takes going back consistently and constantly, which can be daunting. And can be daunting, particularly if you're used to working by yourself. And that happens a lot for visual artists. It's a solo mission. You're solitary, you're there, you're crying, no one hears you. Whatever you're doing, it comes out and everybody thinks you're epic. But the journey to get there is a difficult one. So in this type of space, it also is around vulnerability and the care that goes. And that's what I love about my work. As much as I'm a producer, I really love the development aspect of it and the distribution. The notion of production, like being on set and everything else, it's cute. I think it's awesome, but it doesn't particularly drive me unless I'm the director. I love the development, which is really getting in with the work, really understanding what the work is, really finding out what the possibilities are, laying them down, going back and forth, refining, getting the right partners, letting go of others that might not be working, and that's a hard one. And then having something that the output then to a lot of people looks effortless. But because you spend so much time in development and you spend so much time working through how everything joins to each other and how all this is going to influence the middle schoolers who are going to come in, that is going to influence the public and how you communicate to the public, how you display to the public, how you document the work itself being done, that's where I thrive. So the inclusion happens at that point, and it has to be intentional. Inclusion is not just saying we're missing women, add women. If your project did not think about being representative of the world around you, adding people on later on, it does come off as disingenuous, and depending, some may not see it that way, but I'm just saying that inclusion begins with the seed, that seed idea where you're thinking, okay, who else can be a part of it? And why is it important? And being intentional about that. And also the ethics, with NOMA, one of the things is we do have the middle schoolers and we do have photos of them. However, for me, it was, do we have the releases for these images? Because we know how many images of African children circulate around the world without their permission, or permission from their parents, or permission from the guardians, or permission from the adults, because, African children are used to sell things. So even at that point, no, we're not. If we're taking photos, are there releases for that? If you're working with kids, when they came in, I ensured that they had games to play with. when the one able, we didn't have the machines for like 20, 30 kids, but the idea was, okay, if they're not on the Rift, they're not on the Quest, then where else can they be? They were on the goes, looking at games, working on games, that type of thing. So really, you have to, inclusion starts at the beginning. And inclusion is not additive. Inclusion is really how you think about the world and how you want to represent the world.
I attended the NOMA exhibition, by the way. It was really amazing. I loved how the artists that I know, because I knew a lot of the artists, Michael Musioka, Ijaka,
yes,
and how they were able to transform their usual works into an immersive technology way. And I was so impressed because there was a flow in the story, and it meant that there were people who worked behind all this to put this together. And you talked about disruptive, disruptive technology or disruptive approach. How do you do that?
I didn't realize a lot of what I was doing was considered disruptive, to be honest. I think so. Disruption. I'm now kind of grappling with the word. I think what I've been able to do is create on the edge of things. And that's what feels disruptive for people. And initially, I've always wanted to work online transmedia. And that is what was disruptive, because it wasn't conventional. It was really looking at how work traveled across platforms. But now the disruption is kind of becoming status quo, right? So I don't know what next, unless, I fuse with, a sentient alien. I may be disruptive. But I think this space of working at the edge is considered disruptive. And disruptive is also in terms of the intention of how you're working. A lot of people ask me, how did you think about that? And I was like, because we have to. If we're going to change how we're working, if we're going to change how the financing looks like, we have to think beyond ourselves. And I really don't say outside the box. It's really beyond ourselves, really pushing ourselves to think radically, think differently, think in ways that shifts the space. And that happens over time. And so for me, later, people will say, oh, that was really disruptive. I was like, oh, okay, fine. But that comes out of a continuum of work. And also lending space to new ways of storytelling. I mean, you guys have been running a series on digital storytelling, and that really opens up the space. We had a get together workshop, and Longinos Nagila was talking about how we're shifting how we're working and understanding how to use NFTs. Not just as, dropping the NFT and, people show up for the auction, but looking at how blockchain becomes a way of documenting work, of ensuring that, your copyright is exactly as it is. And, so it was very different. So he's using that technology, he's thinking around that technology is a little bit different, and kind of saying it might not be how people are thinking about earning money and making tons of money. It really is from a literally curatorial kind of way of creating the work and doing that type of stuff. So I think disruption doesn't have to be like a big thing. It just has to be a different way that you're working with the tools that are afforded to you. And also figuring out with these tools, how else can I participate in the world in making my art, in putting my art out there, in disseminating my art. There's going to be a point in time, WhatsApp campaigns are going to be disruptive because we're not on IG or whatever. But I'm just trying to say that for everybody listening, it's not really, trying to do the most different thing. It's really looking at what you have and saying, how can I do it differently? How can I shift a space that I'm in?
So immersive exhibits then. What makes an exhibit immersive, and how has your approach to them evolved with experience?
Well, dear Lord, I should have been on wine. I don't know why I'm on coffee. Okay. There's no hard and fast rule for it. Some will say it's the technology. For me, it's the thinking around how people walk into a space. And that was what I find normal was. It isn't just about the technology. Look, silent movies were highly immersive. You watched a thing and you had a band play the music. Highly immersive experience. And you ate and you smoked and life went on and you drank. And that's how we watched movies. Folklore stories around the fire. 360. Like, let's be honest, those are 360, and it comes from different communities that gathered, and then there was a call response kind of moment. So at times, let's not get let's not get precious about the technology and how do we immerse ourselves, and we need a headset or we need AR, we need a phone, and if your phone isn't that, no. I think really immersion is about creating an experience. Now, if you're working with an immersive technology specifically, you have WebXR, which is a little bit different. You're using it off your computer or off your telephone. I said telephone, off your mobile phone. Off your mobile phone, you're looking at different ways that create a universe you walk into. So I think of immersion as, how do I create a universe that I can look around in? Now, the different technologies that heighten that, for sure, and the different technologies that take us beyond, so that truly is that. But in thinking of exhibitions, it isn't just about having the technology there. It's from the moment people walk into the space, how has their perspective shifted? So actually, now I have a question for Naitemu. Did your perspective shift in any way when you walked into the space of Norma?
Yes, I feel I did not know what to expect, and I'd seen a couple of posts, in social media, but I hadn't visibly gone to the space. So when I went to the space, I was interested in first how the space was used. Usually in an exhibition space, you expect perhaps maybe the walls are the ones that are used and the rest of the space is empty. But when I walked into this exhibition space, I could see that clearly you're creating a world around the space available within the bigger space. So I really like the fact that I could be able to view different artworks by just standing on an empty space, and you're told, just hold this and look through it. That to me was very immersive, actually, because it's creating different worlds that actually don't exist physically, but then they do exist. And also just seeing how the artists transformed their stories in these immersive ways, like watching Ngene Moura's.
Yes,
was so caught me, because I felt like Ngene's works were always immersive just by looking at it.
Exactly.
Now, having
right?
that opportunity to be inside it, it was crazy.
Yes.
Because I was, you feel you're in Ngene's world, in all those little things that he did, and rest in peace, Ngene. We really, a hero. Like I felt that work represented his work beyond what we normally experience, and not just him. All the artists were involved.
No, I think that's so in terms of holding that space and holding that work and making the work speak to each other, and really thinking through how people walk into the space and what they see. On the walls, we had I made sure to have quotes from the different artists that participated as to what their new journey in using immersive technology, using AR, VR tools meant. And also, let's thank you to Jenga CCI for financing the project, and Black Rhino VR for powering the project and working with the artists and the technology that they had that brought everything to life. And this was part of what Black Rhino was doing in terms of a state-of-the-art project. So for me, I worked as an artistic director and curator for the show, and so for the showcase. And so it really, again, as you can see, there are all these different parts that make this. And in terms of immersive experiences, I'd just like for people to know that there are different ways that you can create this. You can, through dance, the different ways that dance and immersive theater works, that is a mixed reality experience. It happens in the headset, on the walls, and in physical, in the physical space itself. So not limiting yourself to one particular technology, but thinking through how the work is evocative in different ways and using different platforms, and then welcoming people into those spaces. And I'm very clear about saying welcoming, because none of this technology exists at home, So there is that moment of, what is this? Is a headset? Where does it go? On my head? It kind of feels weird. How do you welcome people to get to use this? Oh my God, I have to click and do things. How do you make that something that they can access? Right now, Made by Eden are making what you call the snacker, which is this kind of headset that you don't strap on your head, you kind of hold it to your face. So those are also kind of innovations that are happening in the space to really create a more welcoming viewing experience, participatory experience. And for me, even creating immersive experiences comes from my background making film, where it is literally about deconstructing the film, which is audio visual. So how am I using sound in a different way in a space? How are my visuals working that, some can be gaze-based. If someone gets close and looks at certain thing, it opens another world or allows them to access another aspect of the story that they're already in. And so, even going back, it goes back to, for me, making film. So at the end of the day, I think, Nyambura, you and I have had this conversation. It really goes back to story. So how well do you tell a story? How do you create, I was on a what do you call it? Like a webinar yesterday, and John Truby, who's this amazing screen writer, screen doctor in Hollywood, who talks about narrative drive, which is how many actions one of the other propels the person, the protagonist, forward, that makes us as an audience want to watch. So what becomes a narrative drive of this space that you're in? It can't just be like, oh, we have gaze-based, we have this, we have that, it's Six Dwarf and all of that. It's so sexy. But what's the narrative drive? Why am I watching this? Why am I entering this world? You still need a great story, and you still need to know the mechanics of story, and then transport that into the space that you're in, and then explore it now in different ways. Like, oh my God, I can do this through someone just looking. So it's gaze-based. Or I have to look for the shadow. And so I turn around to find where the shadow is. But what prompts me to do that? It's understanding sound design. So at the end of the day, it really is a deconstructed film. It is a deconstructed form of storytelling too. So as much as we propel ourselves forward with all this innovation, a lot of the foundations still stay the same. You still have to create a narrative drive that makes people want to move within this universe. It's not just about the technologies. How do we move? And then, now you have UX and UI designers that help you create that motion through the world that you're in.
As you've been talking about immersive experiences and reminding us that a truly immersive experience is supposed to be one that takes you as closely to the physical as possible. So the best immersive experience is actually a physical one, right? So
oh yeah, is this live? Is this live? Because I'll get in trouble. I'll get into a lot of trouble.
So we'll hide it. We'll unlist it if you think so. And so, as you're talking about immersive experiences, right? We're trying to, even VR is trying to take us into the real. So actually being in a theater is already being there, right? And you reminded me of one of the most immersive experiences I've been to, which also had amazing design, which sound design, which was in Warsaw, Poland. It was it was a blind exhibit that it's a whole museum of really that teaches you about the history of products that have been designed for blind people, etc.
Oh, wow.
The core experience is done with a guide who's actually visually impaired, and these guides take you into a pitch black space and they ask you, where are we? And then you have to feel around, and you have to get around, and you feel, you know, this is in Poland, so there's that kind of, you walk in and it's a refrigerator, it's a cooker, right? People in Poland have small apartments, so you kind of feel like you're in this apartment, and then you walk through and you feel like another room, and then you walk out into the street, and other experiences as well. I don't even want to give too much away, but it kind of makes up for what you don't see with the other senses you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, sorry.
No, go on.
No, and I think just so that I don't get in too much trouble, is that what happens with immersive technology is that it creates our fantasy world, you know, and it creates our future world. So I think that is now the difference. However, let us not get lost in not realizing that this has been we've been getting here steadily as storytellers, because there is a history, there is a trajectory. What was it called? Was it called Sensoria? I'm sorry. But it had smell as part of it. And now we're going back to, and everybody thought this is too much, this is not making sense. And I think it was the early 80s, maybe, I'm not so sure. And then now we're creating smell. We're having an immersive culinary experience, you know? So it's not as new as we think it is. It's just more accessible now in the iteration that it's in right now. And I think working in understanding storytelling is so important, because you can't take it away. The technology is the tool. The content is a story. And however you craft your story, it still has to have narrative drive. So that still has to be brought to bear on how you construct stories, immersive experiences, how we think through the work that we're doing. And going back to what Nyambura said is, you know, looking at the work at Noma and like Ghane's work and all of that, we were Ghana with Ijaka, Imaus, Msioka, Vergodi, Peteros, Sila, all those guys, we sat down and we thought through the work. We went back and forth, and for them to get where they wanted to, and kind of also saying, oh, I'd like this. And then here is a coda who says, like, here you have it. You know, so it was also like magic happening as we went along. So it was, you know, as you said, an amplification of the work, but at the heart of it was a story they wanted to tell. You know, for me, you know, paintings like just 2D, it captures a moment. For them, they were able to take that moment and explore it through AR and VR tools. And then as a curator, I was able to create a story as people walked in to the space and, you know, kind of gave people a feel and made it immersive, if you make, you know, but, you know, conceptually too, you know, it really derives from that. So I look back to just the simple ways that I was trying to use the internet, you know, when Issa Rae came out with Awkward Black Girl, I was like, okay, there's apparently people online who watch things, you know. I mean, YouTube got a defining moment when the BMW movies were released on YouTube, and suddenly we were like, wait, it's not just about, you know, this personal videos that went on, and suddenly it became a cinema medium. You know, BMW started it, not too many people got onto it, but I think not too many brands got onto it right after. But I remember at the National Film Board, they're still trying to figure out how do we use these spaces? You know, how do we, and that's part of audience development, audience interaction, really creating an audience so that whatever you have that comes on later, you have, you know, you're able to market it to a ready audience. And so I tried with Maria's Boys, and we shot a film, we shot a series, 3-parter. And, you know, we were like, oh, what happens if you put things online? And that then kind of creates a sense of, okay, if we're going to be doing this, even if you're telling these stories in this space, now YouTube is so normal for us. It's been normalized in our lives. It's where we get our information, you know, before it was a television, you know. So I think it's a continuum, particularly also, I think, around audience building. Because whatever you're doing, particularly as an artist and even as a brand, you have to have been building your audience. And before you go to an interview, I'm part of this a group called XR Women. And yesterday we had Kathy Hackle on. And what happens is she just said, you know, don't forget, before your interview, they go on your LinkedIn, they go on your socials, find out what you're about and what you're bringing to the table, and what audience are you bringing in? Like, what's your personal brand like? You know, so it's really different now. I mean, I know we've expanded beyond just immersive experiences, but part of it was when you're talking about how Norma had, you know, you had seen some things online, was we're trying to build an audience online. So it makes sense when people come in, and it was really great. And even with the No Direct Flight film season, all of it was about building an audience online so that the work that we put out 2 months later would make sense. You know, it wouldn't have been, and it was during COVID, like right in November 2020. And we had to figure out, how do we bring people to the spaces that are virtual to watch films, and for them to, you know, email us back and say, I never finished watching my film. When is this coming back on? You know, and understanding different types of part of your digital storytelling, I think, also should factor in that people watch differently online. So there's a big aspect of leisure. So you're going to be allowing them more time than you would have in real life kind of event. And that's something that I'm working on with another film festival out of Brazil. And, you know, one of the things is like, yeah, have 10 days, but over a month, because people want to come back. They watch very differently on their devices.
Nice. Actually, talking about film festivals, currently there's Under Our Skin Film Festival, which is about human rights. And we had an opportunity to watch the opening screenings, amazing works by Zippy. And,
yes, she's so prolific. She is such a prolific filmmaker, curator, just producer extraordinaire.
Yeah.
So when it comes to No Direct Flight, I guess that you're a filmmaker, like you've said as well. So hopefully that was an exciting project, and the theme was digital blackness in the age of the internet, right? So how do projects like that contribute to the creatives and the industry as a whole?
As I said, I should have been drinking wine and not coffee. For what we did with No Direct Flight, what I really concentrated on was actually the critique of digital blackness, and what is digital blackness versus what is, not versus, but how do we include Africanness as a part of it? We're also looking at, you know, discussions around how do those shift, and the notion of, you know, it's really interesting to say diversity within a very defined place that's called, the African diaspora. But how does the African diaspora and the African continent, how do we speak to each other? And what is digital Blackness? And one of the things that we really talked about in terms of digital Blackness is how, because in the African diaspora, the access to mainstream broadcast, mainstream spaces is still very much there, very many gatekeepers. How have Black people use the internet and use the digital space and virtual space to continue to create work, to circulate work about themselves and everything else? And then on our side, us we're in Africa, we're like, well, you guys, us, we don't even have access, and so it really was a back and forth. And so how did it contribute to the space is with the conversations and more importantly with the people that we worked with and hired across the videographer that was part of all the media that we made and the team. We had artists that were participating, graphic designers, and we had the filmmakers themselves to have access, actually for people to have access to this type of filmmakers. Because at times, people are like, oh, exposure. I'm like, no. We are exposing you to their work. And what happened was, I've said this on a different program that you had, and it was, we had people from, North America, South America, Europe, Australia, Southeast Asia, Beijing, actually for the access in terms of what we saw, people were really interested in this, and people really, there's a dearth of African content by Africans from the continent. Whew, that's a hard word. So them getting to see this work, some of it was older, it wouldn't get to participate in certain film festivals because of, usually it's about 2 years. And, film festivals want to be, ahead in terms of what they're presenting, and you want fresh and everything else. But some of them are like, where can I watch more of these, And so as filmmakers, I also want to encourage you to have your content available. Some of your films will travel the world for the next 10 years because they're relevant and they're interesting, and because they have such a unique voice. I had a filmmaker ask me, but I did this 3 years ago. Why are you interested? I'm like, because your film is good and it's interesting. And I feel with the film season, I was able to go, outside what film festivals, how they function, and the expiry dates on films is to bring back films that got maybe to tour a little bit, but not necessarily a lot, or they're kind of lost in Vimeo world, and getting them back and getting people to see them. So that was really exciting in terms of a focus on African content, African diaspora content that was speaking to each other. I had a comment from someone who said, I don't get to watch Egyptian film, and that was Hennet Ward. And it occurred to me that, actually, in Kenya, do we get to watch Egyptian film? We don't. Yet there's so much out there. But, what is the system of film festivals and the circulation of cultural products within Africa? Very few times do we get to watch ourselves. And that was, for me, no direct flight, aside from the employment it created, is the ability for us to watch ourselves in ways that have been rare. We're always exporting ourselves elsewhere. And it was just a great moment where we got to see ourselves. And I hope to continue to work in that way.
Other than filmmakers, you had also musicians, right? With the sonic experiences. How did that come about, and how were they involved in it?
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for bringing it. Yeah. So as anyone by now has noticed, that I work across different artistic disciplines and I always bring them together. So for me, the sonic sessions, we had 3 different sonic sessions. So actually, let's start at the beginning. No Direct Flight was meant to be an in real life event over 3 days in May. It wasn't. COVID hit. It was 2020. And we had to rethink how all this was going to be structured, how this was going to exist online, how it was going to have audience show up. And so for me, what became very clear was, I mean, you always say, the work has to be relevant and all of that, because it is, there's a concert, people show up, people enjoy the music and all of that. But then I said, no, it has to be intimate. Now, how do we do this? So we had Fena and Mudhoni Drama Queen. So we had 3 sessions, one Fena and Mudhoni Drama Queen, another one DJ Delight and Ricky Suede, also known as Bithi Masia, and then Espresso, who are new hip hop Nairobi sound group, who actually released their EP with us, like just released some of their music during this time. So all these 3 different sonic sessions, and as well as the films, was about linking past, present, and future. And so with Fena and Mudhoni Drama Queen, I was really looking at, if people were to come and watch, what would they want to see aside from a concert? It's very different to watch a concert online. It doesn't work the same way. But what would we like to know about them and about their creative process, about making this music and interspersing it with the different songs that they're talking about that have, impacted their lives, that they struggled making maybe, or what was the impetus for this type of song? And I started to think through, how can the sonic sessions link past, present, and future for us within Nairobi? Because this was NDF, no direct flight to Nairobi. There was one in London, there was one in Philadelphia, and there's one here. So how do we bring ours to the world? And so for me, Fena and Mudhoni Drama Queen have both very different styles, but at the same time, they're really at the vanguard of what they're doing and how they participate in the world and how they flow in our world, particularly in Nairobi. And then with DJ Delight and Ricky Suede, was really looking at hip hop and popular music in Nairobi, like how long have we been around? Because I find that, each generation thinks they've started something new. Myself included. I really think I'm on the edge of everything. But then, if you do your history lesson, you learn that so-and-so was doing it then. And I think when we start to archive, dive into the archives of different artistic expressions, we get stronger, and we, maybe we'll sample or just look at how far we've come. And so that moment with DJ Delight, who himself with Audio Vault is the reason for a lot of popular music that we have in Nairobi, K Shaka, all those guys. And so that was really interesting. And then Ricky Suede kind of bringing in, the latter end of it, as growing up being influenced by people like DJ Delight. So it was this really trying to meld this past, present, future. And then with Espresso and their sound, which is, very different. It's a collaborative effort between 5 different people, different types of producers, singers, rappers. And so the sonic sessions were part of that continuum of looking at how music, sound is a part of this landscape and a film landscape. I mean, now what is film without sound? Even during the silent films, they'd be playing. So that was really important to me. And with that, it was important to have those sonic sessions as just kind of laying the past, present, future of Nairobi music. And, that just opened the door for other things, It's just a beginning. And, as I said, I'd love to continue doing work like that because it allows me to go across back and forth, and then also find out really great artists to use in my immersive experiences,
So,
amazing.
Yeah, we've got we don't want to take up too much of your time. We've got so many stories. We could probably take up another hour easily. So that's an invitation to come back, of course.
Thank you very much.
So about Akoia Co, where you are now, what you've started, and what you're doing to bring all of these things that you've learned in industry. So what is Akoia Co?
What is? Well, Akoia Company really is a space where I get to play and get paid for it. Um, and my play comes with the type of projects that I take on. And the reason it's called Akoia Company is because we collaborate. And that's always very important. I sent out a request to partner with Nairobi Design Week because we're looking to see how we can create an incubator that is an accelerator for different types of artists, and particularly around digital storytelling and immersive storytelling, and how to use immersive technologies and what to use it for, and just go beyond what they're used to. So it really is about partnering to create an ecosystem within the creative space, the creative and cultural space, so that we can thrive. Right now, we've gone into development. Development is a very unsexy term for I'm writing a lot of proposals. And so I'm looking, my focus is transmedia work. So looking at how a series ties into a WebXR experience, ties into an exhibition, ties into a showcase. So there's a lot of that type of work that I'm really pitching around at the moment. So I have a couple of pitches that I'm taking around. And then also, I've just been very lucky with I've been very intentional with the type of work that I've been doing. And therefore, I've been mentoring a couple of people just quietly, people, they're welcome to ask me questions and all of that. And that's always fun because you get to see how the space is changing. You get to see what's of interest to young people, young creators, and you get to participate in ways that are also fulfilling, that kind of drive the space and allow me to dabble in different, corners of the discipline, so to speak. The big thing right now is also research work around the archive, as you can tell. That's very important for Akoia and myself, is how can we use our archival space to strengthen our creative and cultural industries. And what does that look like? Because at times we spend a lot of time, and this is something that was talked about my generation, you're copying the West, you're always copying the West, you're so westernized, and I was at a family gathering where my uncle, he's so much older, and he's like, our cultures are not strong. And I was like, no, they're very strong. We just don't use them, So that became a challenge for me. It was like, oh, so how are you reinvigorating the cultural space that is already available, the cultural work that's already available? How are you dipping into that, and how are you telling the stories that aren't just, oh, this is a Sex and the City in Nairobi, or this is this and that in Nairobi, or, the way I think there's just certain class of Nairobians. And I think just for all of us who are so connected on our smartphones, we have access to the world in a way that I didn't grow up like that. And so it's always saying it's like in Nairobi in this way. But how about Nairobi, just Nairobi for itself? And we kind of do a deep dive into that, which a lot of other artists are doing. So I think that that's kind of a concentration. It's not to be Nairobi, this is in New York, like in Nairobi or wherever, or London, it's just about how do I represent the space and the place that we're in, by really concentrating on the mundane life, the everyday life, to tell stories.
Thank you for that. We have a question in the chat from Adam Yahweh. On the topic of inclusivity, what advice do you have to encourage women to participate in activities where fewer women are seen? Speaking from the perspective of skateboarding. That's him.
Oh, is that Adam?
That's Adam.
Yeah. Adam, by the way, we're going to talk about that. Adam, thank you for the question. You have to realize the society we exist in. Being a female body in a public space is a very transgressive act that can get you into a lot of trouble. So, and that's something you may never go through as a male body. I'm not going to call you a man unless you define yourself that way. And that's, other social kind of implications for that. But I'm just saying that, being a woman in a public space and taking up space in a public space is a highly transgressive act that comes with different violences, whether muted or overt. So the question is, how are you creating that space, for lack of a better word, as a safe space? But really, there's nothing like a safe space. How are you including interest? How are you, and at times maybe you won't find people for 10 years from now, to be honest. I've had people say that women are not interested in technology. And I'm like, no. But then, they throw around numbers and show me. And I'm like, okay, what's the attrition rate of girls from primary school? How many girls end up, I'm from a certain class that I don't have to think about early childhood marriage, but a majority of girls in Kenya have to think about early childhood marriage, and that's a fact. How many girls are going to secondary school, depending, we say we have free education and everything else, but let's be honest about the world we live in this country. How many girls will be lost to FGM? How many, and these are topics we don't want to discuss because we're so civilized, but I really looking at you, I understand where you're coming from because you want to include, but then there's a gap and you're wondering why. And it really is looking at socially what happens to women, from 0 to 65. And beyond. I'm not saying they die at 65. Women live beyond 65, but I'm just giving you a sense of age. I think it's important to include, but to be honest about the space that you're including and who are you bringing in, who will then also say that this space is also available to us as women. There's a lot of offices that are highly misogynistic, highly masculinistic, so yes, women are in the workplace, but how are we allowed to operate in that space if there's certain things being talked around about us, or there's a different value system that is accorded, or if I speak and say something, Njoroge says the same thing, suddenly it's Njoroge who's considered the guy who had the idea, and to be honest, you will, Adam, I understand where you're coming from, and we've talked about this, and I absolutely understand that you really have the intention of including women, and just think about the world that we actually exist in, and start to think, who are the female skateboarders who are interested? How are you having the space within which they come into that is welcoming to them? And that even means, you go to offices that have no sanitary towel disposal. Women menstruate. The only reason we are here is because of a menstruating female who gave birth to us. Yet that is something that will never be discussed. And, women have to figure it out somewhere else. And that's why you have girls who don't go to school when they're menstruating. Or ashamed when they have their period. So, these are not things that are your fault, Adam, in any way. And I'm not saying you do any of these things, but just understand the world and see who are your female allies within the skateboarding community who will join you and say, you know what, this is a space that is for us. And again, women are not a monolith. So also, that's a fact of life. So you have to just, if you're doing this work, you have to commit to it. And as I said, maybe 10 years from now, when you're old and your knees are bad and you can't skateboard, you'll see like 15 women, 2 guys, but you just have to commit to the work. I commit to ensuring that women, no, not even women, we are represented as the different identities that we are with the work that I do. And I do it every day, not every day, every time I have a project intentionally. And hopefully in 10 years, we'll never have to even think about that. And the people I work with will be representative of the different identities around, and they would have gone off and done other things because we work together and they have the experience, and they create a whole other partnership that we can work with. So you'll have your work cut out for you, Adam, but don't stop.
I think it's very encouraging even to see, women
Exactly.
in such spaces like you. It's a pioneer.
Oh, thank you.
Exactly.
I was thinking it was about Adam. I'm like, yes, it's very encouraging. Adam is asking this question.
No. That's encouraging too. But yeah, it is encouraging for creatives who are just starting, right? To be able to see their spaces that are run by women and are inclusive and are pioneering for female creatives to actually get in the spaces and not otherwise, right? So well done on that too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And everybody is welcome.
Yes.
And and just one thing, as I said, which is very important, everything I've done hasn't worked out the first time. For all the creatives out there, I have failed very many times. Very, very many times. The reason I'm still here is I've picked up myself, I've learned, or maybe not at times, but I have continued and I have persisted. And I really want to encourage people that, as I said, the program I wanted to get into in uni, I didn't get into it the first year. I didn't. I had another year of English literature and having to hang around Kenyan kids and saying I'm doing English literature while everybody was being an engineer or a computer scientist, and, the embarrassment of, oh, you do English literature? Oh, you're dumb, but it's really, I just want to reiterate that it's not always going to go the way you expect, but persist. Just persist and do your homework.
Thank you.
Wise words.
Yes.
Have you got any question or any other wise parting thoughts that you'd like to leave us with? Or I said question for the community. Any answers that you'd like to get?
Yes. I would like to know what people, I know this is such a broad question, but bear with me. Excuse me. What do people actually want to see and watch? Is it fantasy? Is it horror? In whatever medium, right? Moving image, that is, and also in immersive. Like, what are the stories that you'd like to explore? Like, what are your interests? I'd really like to know, because the work that I do needs to have an audience, and I'm entertained by myself every day, but what do people want to see? What do people want to learn? No, not learn, sorry, get to dig into. Like, what are the kind of maybe themes or ideas or moments in history? Like, what do people actually want to see? What do people respond to? I think that would be interesting, because we just have, we have the telenovelas, we have the drama, we have very specific media that we have access to that's mass broadcast. But like, what do people want to see? Like, what's of interest? Is it historical? Is it fantasy? Is it horror? Is it thriller? Like, and what kind of space do they want to see emerge out of all of this?
Thank you.
So more around the themes of the content rather than the platforms.
Yeah, just like, what is it that you'd like to see? Is it about the elephants in Mount Kenya? I don't know.
Probably people have many different varied interests. That would be a very interesting question.
No.
Community.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And then we can create and create competitions or create anthologies around that. I don't know. as I say, I like to play.
Nice. And also, well done on the Games for Change Festival.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
How is that going? How did that go?
Oh, that was daunting. I was lucky that I did my recording. Now, this is something I'm lucky for, because in my area, my electricity was always cutting out on the days that I had meetings with Games for Change. And I was like, Kenya Power has a thing against me. But in the end, so luckily they were like, you know what, let's record this ahead of time. And so that's how I consider myself lucky. I got to have the recording ahead of time. So it was super easy, just kind of eased into the Q&A. Games for Change is a really great platform. It's also free. So you guys, for next year, inshallah, it's still on and we're still here, is that just, sign up, get a ticket, get to see all the different games around the world and immersive experiences for change, health. Like, it just opens up a whole different space around knowing what else you can be doing in terms of gaming and XR particularly. And for me, it was really exciting to present NOMA, and also looking from the standpoint of the space that we exist in, technologically speaking. Where are we going? Where are we heading to? How is WebXR opening up for us, considering our access to smartphones? So it was really, NOMA was an entry point for discussing the ecosystem within which we exist for all of this to happen. So Games for Change, I'll actually share with you guys. And thank you so much for supporting me in the different ways that you have. It's just been such a pleasure. So thank you so much. So I'll share what I have from them. And I encourage other people to, submit their papers. I literally submitted my paper and they're like, okay, come on, and that's how everything happened.
Are there any must-try experiences you came across? And like something people can put in their browser and see?
No, I can't remember right now.
Okay.
But I will share. There was one from, okay, I can't remember. It was from a Latin American country. But I'll try, and I think it was day 2. It was very interesting. But yeah, I'll share it with you guys.
Thank you. Nice. Well, that's it. Where can people find you, discover your work, get in touch with you?
We're on Instagram at Akoia Co, AKOIACO, and on the web, www.akoia.africa. But mainly just, send us a DM. We respond, imagine. We do. Actually, that's how Zamani Skateboards and Akoia started working together. Just sent us a DM, and here we are.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyambura. This has been awesome. We could go on and on, but I think we'll...
I know.
Yeah, we've still got so many other projects of yours to get through.
Yes.
So we'll save the second half of your career, or the first one rather, for next time.
No, for sure. And thank you very much. And thank you for this platform. It's really excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Drink wine, not coffee.
Yeah, coffee. Next time you can have wine.
Yeah.
Next time I think I'm just gonna, all these hard-hitting questions.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Good night.
Good night.